the things we'll be covering today, we'll be talking about the approach that we've taken. We'll have an outline of the package. We'll talk with Helene, who's here and giving us her time on the value of unconscious bias training, and have some open discussion time. Sorry, Kim, just jumping in there.
Have that at the top of my list, and that's why I forgot. Thank goodness you did that.
It was on my list and I forgot it. So,
I know.
we're rolling with it. We're rolling with it.
We're keeping it real, man. As I was just saying, that we have it's been a huge success to where we've come with this journey, this unconscious bias training so far. And there's such a diverse range of companies that are using it, which is why we wanted to make this such a big deal today. And, at the moment, it's large government departments and corporates that have taken it on, and just a variety of industries. But what we've found is that the change in this e-learning space is just happening so fast. And we needed to up our game again, which is why we're doing this, because we want to continue offering the quality experience that, we're becoming well known for here now at Skillpod. And also this DE&I journey now needs to include belonging. It's got to have that B in there. And as e-learning designers, we put people at the centre of everything we do. And this is a very important update for us. So we want to help businesses continue our journey. And we have included what's next in unconscious bias in this new course. And our approach, and most importantly, we needed to accept our accessibility game. Look, I've got my words all screwed up now. They're all going round in circles. Everyone in the workplace deserves to have the same opportunities to learn at work, which is why we think the accessibility part of this new course is so important. But while I'm trying to talk a good talk here, it's not really me who created this program. And I really want to bring the rest of the players in and introduce the rest of the team. Now, Lee, who you've met a wee bit already, is just one of the most important people in the values of bringing this to life. Lee is our ARCO development manager. She keeps me on track. And when Lee applied for this role, she sent me the most amazing covering letter before I even got to her CV, and it kind of had me hooked already, because it had these perfect attributes in that we were looking for. And here's just a few of them. The first one was, I have a good sense of humour. I enjoy working with others and I respect diversity. And I have strong communication skills and I feel comfortable sharing my own perspectives as well as listening to others. And I have experience as an executive committee member for the Foundation and Bridging Education New Zealand. And I participate in that learning and technology advisory group. And I'm currently working on projects for Te Ponga and for both curriculum design and the development of the ARCO framework. So you can see the experience Lee's got. And then she went on to say, I can identify and initiate potential products and I can drive improvement where necessary. And she has a good understanding of Mātauranga Māori, Te Tiriti o Waitangi and Te Awa Māori. And she had completed her level 2, 3 and certificates in Te Awa Māori, and she's on a learning journey as she connects with her whakapapa and strongly believes in these value-based approaches. Now, I just can't put into better words how fabulous Lee is. And while she's been working with us, she went on to finish her master's thesis to focus on whanaungatanga and the development of online learning in an online learning environment. Lee, you're a pleasure. We'd be lost without you. Thank you. Now, Kim Butterfield is the next important part and member of our team. I don't think Kim's here today, and I don't really want to tell you all her name out loud because I don't want you to snaffle her. She's just been a fantastic learning designer who has a role to interpret Lee's instructional design documents and create the visual yumminess that you're going to see today. Her X factor is in UX design, her superpower, and she is just fabulous at developing the pace and the inclusiveness that these modules need, and it's just taking this content to the next level. So Tim is the last essential piece of this, and poor old Tim, who's working everything here in the background, and I think we are lucky enough to see his face, as Tim got thrown into the deep end with this one, as he only joined us in late November, and we were already well on the way on our vision for this package. But Just like all of you, we know one of the hardest things with learning is getting engagement and showing people the value in a piece of training and waving that magic glowing light that all of this will be fun in front of our learners' eyes. And you're all here today because I think Tim did a really good job of promoting the marketing and getting you all engaged. And thank you, Tim, for stepping into the job. I'm very grateful. But that's just our team. You know, we can't do what we do, and we can't win awards with what we do without fabulous subject matter experts. And the really important person in the room today, who I'm sure you are all here to meet, is Helene Deschamps. Helene, I think you probably need to give us a wave, unless Tim's been able to pin you at the top somewhere. Thank you. You have been involved in this unconscious bias training, I think, since just about the very beginning, and 6 years ago, when you were working as a facilitator for Diversity Works New Zealand. You know, your renowned expertise in cultural intelligence and uncovering unconscious bias is just awesome. And you now run your own business, Changing Now, with a focus on executive coaching with a global view. Believe it or not, I've only met Helene once in person in all these years, and it's been such a pleasure working with you online and through the email that we just couldn't have done it. And I feel like I know you so well already. But look, before we move on and take a look, there's one other important group of people that is needed in putting together any learning package that we create here at Skillpod. And I think we need to thank that group more than anyone else, because it's all of you who are here today. You know, we totally believe that the power in our community are you guys. You're the ones at the coalface. You see what your people need and how you like to digest information and how they are willing to engage with the information, whether that be on a mobile device or a desktop. And whether that be with tailored content that is directly and specifically aimed at your industry, for learning that is supported to bring the life behind the screen, you tell us about it. You give us that feedback, and we are listening. We listen hard, and we try to take in as much of the feedback that you give us as physically possible. You tell us that you told us that this material and this course needed to be more Aotearoa centric, and we've made it that. And you told us that your people were well aware of unconscious bias, but some think they are more aware than others. So we've challenged them on that, and it's in module 1. And we've asked for more around unconscious bias in the recruitment space. And we've included some scenarios in this in an activator course to specifically address this. We couldn't make this program as good as what it is without your feedback. And for that, we are so thankful. This new unconscious bias package has been sent out for peer review, and it's gone to leading government departments, to the legal sector, to the tertiary sector, to the health sector, to the New Zealand creative sector. It even went to the aviation sector. So a big cross section of people. And we really, really believe that workplaces of all sizes can engage in this learning. And we get out of bed and are driven by the passion that when your people engage in this learning in the workplace and they get to grow in the workplace, then they take this learning home and they influence their family with the knowledge that they've picked up from here. And that impact on how it has in their family then impacts on the community and how they interact with others. And for that's what human skills are all about. I think that's just a really important part. But Lee, you can talk about that part a lot better than I can. And I think I need to hand over my twisting tongue to you. Thank you.
Kia ora. You just excuse me, I'm going to share my screen, but you know what it's like when you jump from Zoom to Teams to Google Meet, and you know it takes a minute just to recalibrate about, you know, how you do these things. So I'm going to do that now. Just give me 1 second.
I'm a bit blown away by how many people are here. Thank you so much for getting up so early in the morning.
Let's see how we go. Is that working? I'm going to move myself right over to here. Hopefully you can see me.
Yeah, looks
Everybody
good.
good? All good? Excellent, excellent. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the approach that we took. I think I came in to Skillpod with a slightly different perspective in terms of I really wanted to do work that was value driven. It's really important to me that we have a really clear approach. And for me, that, as Kim mentioned, it was about putting people at the centre and really being driven by growing the individual, and in turn it radiates out to their whānau, their community, their workplace. So that's where we started. So the first aspect of our approach was really that we wanted it to be human-centred. So what that means is that we really had to understand the perspectives and behaviours and challenges of our ākonga, our learners, the people that will be using our modules. And we did that through working with our current users and finding out what their needs were. And we also did that through the use of reviewers and getting feedback. And I have to say that process was fairly lengthy because I was going backwards and forwards between all of the reviewers and the comments and really trying to tweak it just to meet as many of those needs as we possibly could. Yeah, so we really wanted to put ourselves in the role of the learner, and we wanted them to connect with it, and we wanted it to be engaging and also connect with emotions. So you'll see in this example of a slide here, we're asking people to think about how they might feel if the comments are directed at you. This is one of my favorite slides. You actually click between those little audios and you hear two sentences that are slightly different, and they actually make you feel different ways. So we really wanted that to be part of these modules, that you felt and connected with them. Now let's see if I can move on to the next slide. Here we go. The next part was really that values-driven approach. I am a learner in Te Ao Māori. It's really important to me. I do whakapapa to the Waikato, so that's something I've been learning about for a number of years. And for me, whanaungatanga and manaakitanga are two values that I really connect with. So whanaungatanga is around that idea of relationships and connections. So that's where my master's research came in, because I was trying to find out, how do we develop that connection in an online environment, or where we might not be having those synchronous interactions with people. So that was really important for me, is around how do you develop a relationship with something that you can't, it's not a person. And so that came down to some of the language that we used, how we structured the learning, the graphics and the visual. There's a whole lot of elements that went into making people feel like they could connect with this learning and see themselves reflected in it. And then manaakitanga is around that, it actually is so strongly connected to whanaungatanga, but it's around that kindness, it's around that reaching out, it's around wrapping around people and awhiing them and helping them and supporting them. So we also considered that in the design in terms of how we welcome people in. So you can see in this slide, we really want to thank people. They're giving their time and their energy and their wairoa, their spirit to complete this training. So we wanted to acknowledge that, and we wanted to make sure that they felt supported through the learning. Next one, there's 4, just so you know. Number 3, we want it to be scaffolded. So I've actually come from a background of being a primary school teacher originally, and then a tertiary sector educator, and then I was teaching the tertiary sector educators. So it's around pedagogy for me as well, and what I wanted to make sure was that the learning was scaffolded. And as Kim mentioned, it's been a little bit tricky, because we know that some of our participants come in and already have some knowledge, and others come in with no knowledge. So trying to get that balance right was really a challenge, and we have been able to do that in Module 1, actually with some self-checks and some ways that people could progress a little bit faster if they already have some knowledge of unconscious bias. So we scaffolded it in the beginning. The first modules are really around understanding the concepts and definitions, and then right through to the very last module, where we've got frameworks so people can actually apply them in their context and practice the skills, such as the pause framework, where they can look at their own situation and behaviour and analyse that as they go along. And the last one we're going to share today is around the accessibility. Again, this was really important for us. We wanted to make sure that as many people as possible can engage with this training. And so we had to do some upskilling on that. I came in and I was not familiar with the WCAG standards, which are the standards around accessibility. So that was a really big piece of learning for me to understand what that meant.
Thank you. I'm only here today and Monday, and then I'm off on holidays. So.
Oh, where are you going on holiday?
Somebody isn't on mute. Now they are. That's all good.
Yeah, so we had to do a lot of learning around accessibility. I had to learn how to use NVDA, which is the screen reading software that we use to test our modules. My goodness, that was a real learning curve, and really made me empathise with people who have to engage with that on a daily basis. and I keep thinking, surely with AI, we've got some opportunities to improve that experience for people. So it actually sounds like a real person talking and not a robot. So yeah, we did a lot of learning, and we also used accessibility experts. We were lucky to have someone who's an expert in neurodiversity who supported us as well along the way, and also some really great reviewers who themselves use those kinds of tools and were able to give us some really great feedback. So the other part of our approach was really making sure it was accessible. So that's kind of as the 4 key pieces of our approach. Obviously, there's a whole lot of other stuff that's gone into it, but just to give you a taste of where we were coming from and what we really placed as being important, that those were the 4. And so what I'd like to do now is actually move on to just give you a little bit of a snapshot of the modules. I'm not going to give you too much because we really want you to come back and talk to us and engage with us, and we'll talk to you more about them at another time. But I'm just going to show you the 5 modules in the package and a wee outline of what's included in those. So, as mentioned, scaffolded approach. Module 1 is the introduction to unconscious bias. So this is really about the concepts of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So that's where we've really upped things in this one. We've talked about belonging, and we hope that these modules give people a sense of belonging as they work through them. Module 2 turns a little bit more scientific, so it's about the brain and unconscious bias. So we really dive into the parts of the brain, which I had no idea about myself. So again, a lot of learning, and how the brain perceives differences and how it reacts in the ways that it does. And we've had a lot of feedback that people really enjoy this module. They find it quite interesting because it's something new to them. The 3rd module is around stereotypes and unconscious bias. And we actually look at that connection because there's a very strong connection between stereotypes and unconscious bias. And I've been very fortunate to have some sessions with Helene and hear from her around some of these things to help me better understand them too as we put these modules together. So this one's really around using explanations and real life examples and scenarios to think about stereotypes and the impact of those on unconscious bias. The 4th and 5th modules are kind of tied together, so I'm going to go 4, 5. 4 is strategies to address unconscious bias, and then 5 is frameworks to minimize unconscious bias. So this is where we get into the part where we really want that our ākonga, our people using the modules, to start thinking about their own behavior and reflecting on that and reflecting on incidents that they might see in their own context, and then learning these frameworks that they can actually apply to challenge unconscious bias, not only their own, but also that of others in their workplace. So I really like 4 and 5 because I feel like that's where you get to do the doing. And that's, to me, that's where the learning sinks in, is when you actually start analysing your own behaviour and how that affects your unconscious bias. So that's a whirlwind tour of the modules. I want to let you know that they look and feel awesome when you're in them. So I hope that you all do want to engage with the preview and see more of our modules. And I'm going to pass it off back to Kim.
Oh, thanks. I think we need to introduce Helene, don't we? And let's get Helene and get this conversation going. Helene, welcome. Thank you very, very much. We sort of had some few questions, and we would really like everybody to be able to jump in and join in the conversation here and ask you some questions as well if they've got some queries about where we're coming from. But to get things started, we were talking about the importance of UB training for individuals and businesses. I think you've had a lot of insights and experience into that. What's the value in doing this training in your workplace? Yeah.
Well, I think, so first of all, Morena, and really great to see everyone here, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with Kim and Lee. I think every time I engage, I have less to do because the level and the quality of the programs goes up, so that's fabulous, loving it. I think in terms of unconscious bias training, it's an area that sometimes get a bit of a bad press in the world. And I think that's because we try and load it up with trying to solve the whole issue. And potentially we would like to eliminate bias, which we cannot do. So in terms of managing expectations, I think unconscious bias training might not be the answer to everything, but it's really an initial part of the puzzle for individuals and businesses, because until you even understand the concept and how pervasive it is and how much, despite our best intentions, how much it actually impacts the life and the experience of others, whether it's at home or in the workplace, until you see that, you can't really have strategies, and you can't try and minimize it. You can't try and improve yourself. So I think it's really an initial step and an essential part of everyone's education, so that then we can be more responsible. So, in terms of how it affects all of us, I mean, really unconscious bias, they impact how we see ourselves, they impact how we perceive and decode the world. And as a consequence, they impact how we either react when we are worried or how we choose to respond. And they impact very much how we make decisions. And that's usually what interests lots of the businesses I work with. Like, we actually all do want to make better decisions. That would be a good idea. And most of us also want to be inclusive and want to make people feel like they belong. We don't always realize that in our behaviors, we're not acting that way.
That's interesting, because one of the things that I get feedback and pushback on all the time is about the training being organisational wide, and whether it is just based for, and you're buying just for a leadership team, or whether you're buying for the whole company. And there's something to be said for especially some of the larger government departments who have taken this training organisational wide, and the difference that it makes, and having everybody on the journey at the same time. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in organizations, obviously there is a cost involved and scale involved. And definitely in the workshops that I have run, anyone will benefit. It's how open you are to learning, how open you are to challenging yourself. Obviously, as a team leader, you impact in your decisions and in the way you design and run processes. You impact the life of many, many people, but all of us can benefit from unconscious bias training.
Yeah. And we've probably, the role of leadership and management in that, how are they directing it? How are you finding the part they play in getting everybody engaged and directing that conversation?
Well, I think they play an essential part in organization. And one word that, and I know a few people in the audience will be very familiar with that word. We say that leaders or managers, they carry what we call this leadership shadow, which means that the way they behave, their values, what they say, who they talk to, what they focus on, all of that sends messages all the time to the rest of the organization, whether they want it or not. People are watching them and people are interpreting what's being said or not said. So they carry a big role no matter what, as soon as they enter the door. And also if we look on studies around how we communicate, what's now proven is that what we say, so the words are only 7% of the way we communicate with people. More than 55% is visually what we see, so the body language, and then 38% is the tone of voice. It's vocal, what are we hearing? So all of those things leaders carry with them, and is going to have a real impact. So what can leaders do based on that? So it's effective when we see them being at the forefront, first of all, of doing their own work, understanding their own biases and privileges, rather than I just came here, because I was hardworking. Then it's them prioritizing the awareness work in the organization, so provide a platform, a common language, so that people can raise concerns and talk about bias. It's them sponsoring processes and systems that highlight and mitigate bias. So, for example, in recruitment, in communication, in talent management, checking for bias before we make a big decision, always having that coming at the forefront. Another thing that's really important is them having, I think, the humility, the vulnerability to share their own struggles with bias, rather than be dismissive around like, oh yeah, I know what it is. I know what this is. I've got this covered. I did the training. And making themselves vulnerable, because if I make myself vulnerable, I give you the permission to be vulnerable too. So they can, sponsor in many ways.
That's huge. And I love the fact that there are so many parts of our communication that impact and that influence, because one of the questions that we are getting at the moment is, what's new in this space? Where do we move on? We've been doing this, 6 years. We did 6 years ago. But and when we started, unconscious bias was like this big word that we actually had to tell people that what it meant, and it was just a word to them. Now everybody understands that meaning. But where do you see that journey going forward further? Where's the next part in the progression of this?
So I think, Kim, the first thing I would challenge is I think everyone says they understand what it is, but I think
Yeah.
many times when I talk with leaders, especially in the one-on-one space in coaching, after 5 minutes, we do establish that they actually have not at all permeated the impact that they're having on others, or that they think they're having and they're not having. So
Yeah.
I think we're glossing the surface, and I think we've got this kind of action bias, and we see like, got it covered, what's next? But actually our brain hasn't evolved that fast. So I think we can carry on with the education, really important. But in terms of, I think the trends that are coming through, I think more and more we're conscious that it's not a one-off education session. So, really important to have those modules, but it's also the conversations that are generated from those modules. It's what do we do differently? What are the pitfalls? So really it's part of a system, and it's part of a conversation. That's really important. More and more we see it being woven into leadership programs, so that it's not a separate DIB box, diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging. It's really part of being a good human, and it's part of making good decisions. I think
it's not just leaders though, is it? You want it to be organized. You do want it to impact all the way down. I think I have this thing that sometimes we get caught a wee bit too much in leadership training, and we forget about everyone else who is part of this conversation and part of raising the awareness of bias and the impact it has. Yeah.
I find too that every time I look at the modules, I go back to analysing it myself again. Like, it's really interesting that you think, yes, I know that, but actually every time I'm working on them and revisit it, I suddenly think about something that might have happened that is an example of unconscious bias, or I think about, oh, I didn't handle that very well, and I wonder why I did that. So even though I'm familiar with the content, you do need that kind of touchstone on it, I think, semi-regularly, because you do fall back into those patterns, and it's really hard to break, and you need those processes to be there regularly to kind of check yourself and go, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that. And even I've been talking to my kids about it and saying to them, explaining to them what that looks and feels like, and it's actually really been quite powerful for me working through these models and developing them to look at my own biases and think about how I behave. It's been amazing.
Yeah, that pose model lead that you've introduced in the modules is really important for that. And yeah, every day, I think what we develop is the ability to catch ourselves, hopefully a bit sooner, and course correct, but we will still be biased every day through the course of action. So that we cannot eliminate, because that's what helps us to keep moving. So yeah, definitely I learn something every day, and I catch myself every day, and I can't believe that's happened again.
Yeah.
I think one other trend, Kim, that's quite important is that, and I think this training package does it really well, is to look at those everyday microaggressions, micro inequities, little things that are going wrong. Because initially, I think unconscious bias was focusing mostly on the extreme cases, which are obviously very important. But then it was quite an easy cop out for people to say, oh no, I don't say things like that. No, I'm not racist. No, I'm not misogynist. And then to just move on and not take this really seriously. Whereas most of the time, it's those kind of really widespread, insidious little comments or not feeling included in a conversation. They're the ones that hurt that sense of inclusion and belonging every day. So really important to have those daily examples, which I think Lee has included really well in the modules.
That's really interesting, because one of the questions we get asked all the time is about the different types of bias, and people are wanting to focus on the different types of bias, where this training, it does mention them because we're getting asked about it all the time to cover it, but it's more about the awareness. It's more about the awareness of the micro and aggressions, the way the brain works, the way the brain processes, and the recognition part of it. I do feel sometimes that people get a wee bit hooked on one particular bias, and it may be that their workplace or their organisation, that is the bias that is impacting the most, that's happening the most. But I don't think it matters where you are sitting on the bias type of spectrum. It's about how the way you deal with it and the way you process it is the same for all. Yeah. which is
I think you're right, Kim, because also, I mean, I think neuroscientists have recorded more than 175 types of biases. So, it's like naming your own planet. At some point, it's not one bias at play. There is a situation and there is the way that it triggers me. And then usually you're going to have, 3, 4, 5 types of biases at play. But sometimes being able to name something helps to define it and have a good conversation about it. So it's something that we worked on with Lee around, which ones do we highlight, which one don't we? Because we could go on forever and those would not be micro modules anymore. It would be an encyclopedia.
and I don't necessarily feel that it's moving the conversation forward. You're just delving and playing in that same pool. And because that's actually part of my next question is the way unconscious bias affects culture and the dynamics in a team. We've talked about the leadership side and how it needs to be with everybody, but what's the positive side of this? When you can take this training into play and everybody in the team has been able to do it, what are some of the positive impacts that you have experienced in organizations?
So I think, if we think like, there is this formula for culture, and I can't remember where I read it, so it's not from me, but it says that culture is it's values plus behavior times consistency. So it's kind of the way stuff gets done around here, so rather than just the statement. So it's things that are shared, things that are quite pervasive, it's enduring, it's the social pattern, and it's implicit. So it's all of those things that are happening in the background. So they can either be negative or they can be more and more inclusive. So I think with unconscious bias training, what I've seen is that with awareness comes a dialogue, better conversations, more curiosity, more inquiry, more empathy, because we start knowing things about our colleagues we had no idea we had done in a previous job, because we see them in their current role and position of authority, what's happening outside of work, in their community, with their family life. So we really bring those human bonds. And the other thing is that we could think, well, I can learn about X in a book, or I can Google it, but I don't have empathy when I Google something. When someone who's, a great person sitting next to me tells me an experience, even if I'm surprised, I'm much more likely to relate and create that empathy, so accept that difference than just because I've read an article about it. So that's really what I've noticed. And from that comes, better dialogue, better innovation, people speaking up, and people being also more forgiving of each other, and based on the fact that we're all humans. So that's
love. I mean, you had just absolutely swimming in Lee's swimming pool here with where she's come from with the people-centered approach for all of this. It's such a large part of where we want to come in our training. And Lee, maybe you could talk about that a wee bit more, about that input. Are you there?
Yep, yeah. Sure am.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the people-centered stuff, is that what you're...
Yeah, I think so, because what Helene has just talked about, the two match up so beautifully.
Yeah, they do.
It's that whole coming together of putting that person first and valuing them.
Yeah.
I always have this thing, I'm sure my team's heard me say it, that you don't come to work to eat your lunch. You come to work because you're bringing your whole self to the environment. And I'm hearing from businesses a lot about productivity being an issue, about people coming to work and just doing their job but not necessarily giving. How does unconscious bias and having a human-centered approach and giving some training and learning back to the team so that they have control, personal growth, they become part of the conversation, they feel valued in the workplace? We can do this. This isn't something that's too hard to achieve. It can be done. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think even organizational culture, which we were talking, or Helene was talking about before in relation to unconscious bias, organizational culture is also impacted by those values that we've used in terms of whanaungatanga and manaakitanga. And part of looking after people and creating connections, as Helene's mentioned, is generating those conversations. And that's what this training does. It generates those conversations. I've gone outside of my own office and had conversations with my whānau and people around this topic. And it's been really interesting. And through that learning, we try to bring in the empathy aspect by using the scenario. So we definitely use scenarios that are everyday scenarios that actually someone can go, oh, I've had something like that that's happened too. and oh, I hadn't thought about that. And that's what it did for me as well. And it's done that for our users, our reviewers too, who have really made great comments around the use of the scenarios. And I think the other great thing is with our tailoring that we offer here at Skillpod is that we can swap those scenarios out for ones that are specific to a workplace, to the context of the learner. And we've had conversations with one of our clients who's really wanting to do that. They want to make some slight changes with the tailoring to make the scenarios relevant for their people. And that means that they can then empathise more with that and see themselves reflected in the module. So, we've designed it so that there is that flexibility to really tailor it to work for people in their industries and in their workplaces, and use examples that we can all relate to. Not just of leadership, but actually just of everyday incidents where we might see these things happening. The other thing I really like is that in one of the modules we talk about being brave. And to me, that's a really big thing too, because it's not just our own unconscious bias, it's about being brave enough to see it happening around us and thinking about how we can deal with that in a mana uplifting way. So that's around, if you see it happening, how do we deal with it in a way that still upholds and values the people involved, and I guess in a really caring way resolves that and calls it out. And so there's some really great scenarios in there where you can play that through and see how you might deal with those situations. So definitely people-centered through all of the modules in terms of how do we grow an individual? How do we support them to look at both themselves and look at the people around them? And in turn that grows and radiates out. In the education space, there's this really great model, and I can't remember his name, but it is that concentric circles where the individual's at the centre and then their whānau and community, and I always have that in my head as I'm designing, and I think if the individual is doing this, what will the impact be on those people around them? And so we hope that these modules certainly radiate out from the individuals that do them to their whānau and wider to their communities.
Look, I'd love to open this up to the floor, to all of you, and what's happening in your workplace. Have you got any questions, or because we've certainly built in time for that today, that you would like to talk to Helene about or talk to us about, and take advantage of having everybody here? Please don't hesitate to unmute and just jump in. That's perfectly fine. Helene, that culture side, we were sort of talking about how it moves people forward and moves the organisation forward. What about from a strategy point of view from businesses, in the leadership stuff you're doing? Do you see much happening in how it's changing businesses to achieve strategy and growth?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's usually, when we talk about the business case for diversity and inclusion, there is always the head and the heart. And I think, on the head and the strategy side is making better decisions and innovating. And I think it's just around challenging mental models and status quo. I mean, due to affinity bias and the way organizations are structured, usually when you're at the leadership table, people have a lot in common, and there is a fair bit of affinity bias going on. And the risk with that is that we just don't see the elephant in the room. We don't see the new trends happening with our customers or stakeholders, so we don't cater for them. And we've got that confirmation bias that, I only see what confirms my point of view, my preferences, and I can't address what I can't say, and that amazing conformity. So definitely being able to pose, being really aware and humble around the importance of bias, and really scanning for bias, getting different voices and looking for dissenting voices is really important. And there was a really interesting study that many of you might have seen from McKinsey, which was talking about the superstar firms, which is, the top 10% of the firms in terms of economic profit. Through a cycle, half of them lose that superstar status. So you don't remain a superstar by being complacent. It's really easy to fall. And I think that's something for, very successful organizations to remember. Success now means continuing to scan and challenge ourselves and getting those different voices at the table, and not just as a, tick the box, but really challenging our mental models.
Thank you. That's very awesome. Elaine, one of the things that we wanted to achieve today was to make the most of having you at the table, because we don't always have continual access to our subject matter experts. And thank you very much for making yourself available for us to be able to talk to today. We're just very grateful. And I'm sure that, you know, if there's any questions, I'll be able to forward them on, but it's just, we're very grateful. This course is available. We will put in actually, let me go another way. If you'd like to put your email address into the chat, we'll send you through a preview and you can look at module 1 and go through it. To share it on the screen with you right now, there's too much to read. You can't hear what we're talking about and read and process and enjoy it all in the one go. But we really don't, no obligation, just put your email address in there and we'll share it with you. From a delivery point of view, Lee's talked about tailoring. I mean, we totally believe that businesses associate and connect. People connect with a piece of learning that is targeted at their industry and their audience. So you can take these modules straight off the shelf or you can tailor them for your people. Delivery wise, if you don't have a learning management system, that's no big deal. We have a portal that we can host through that you have the full back end information. And we also have it where you can, we call it own it or loan it. So you can loan it from us with a 12-month user license, or you can own it by buying the SCORM files. So if you've got your own learning management system, buy the SCORM files and keep them forever, or buy the storyline files. This training is totally different if you have had it in the past and you want to update. At the moment, the updates will happen as you renew, but come through. But if you want it before that, just reach out and talk to me and we can make it happen. It's just a bit much to update everybody at the same time. So we'll do it on a priority basis. So any other questions? I think Tim's going to put in my meeting link into the chat, and he's going to put a link into the unconscious bias landing page where you can get some more information. There's a snippet preview on the unconscious bias landing page, but we really want to share all of module 1 with you. So if you put your email address in, we'll actually share way more than the snippet. And if you want to preview the whole lot for your team, not a problem at all. Just yeah, let me know, reach out and make a meeting and we can do that for you. We usually open the portal up for a week so you can have a good look and share it with the rest of your team. Implementation, I haven't talked about that, Lee. There's a good idea.
No? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to have a wee chat with that in the implementation side? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So a really important part for us in this conversation is not just providing the product, but also ensuring that people have success with how they implement it. We don't want it to be an experience where it's not embedded within an organization or a business. So what we've done is we have developed and are still developing resources to support the implementation of these modules. We have an implementation guide, which is for anybody who's bringing it into the organization to help set up the rollout of these modules. So it talks about developing a launch plan and how you will actually bring these into the organization in a way that will be more engaging and meaningful and result in more success. We also have other resources that sit with the modules like discussion cards. Again, these are really important to bring the learning to life in your workplace and team meetings and those types of things. And we've also putting together a post-training survey so you can actually get some feedback around how your people found the training. The other thing that we offer is implementation mentoring. So if you're wanting to bring this into your organization and you're not quite know where to start and you want some support with that, we actually offer a mentoring service where we will work with you one-on-one to help you develop that plan and roll that out to your people. So that's really exciting. And then we've also got a new service called Smart Skills, which we're offering, which is really exciting because we're working on that this year. And that's around supporting organizations to set up their learning and development framework. So we've got lots of cool options there to help you with your implementation of not just these modules, but learning and development in general in your business.
Look, Helene, thanks, Lee, because what's ringing in my head and what you've talked about and what Helene has talked about is that this is about opening a conversation, isn't it? And that's what our micro-learning modules do. It's about opening the conversation and continuing the conversation. And how do you continue the journey? Yeah, I'm so pleased to see you nodding, Helene, because I think it's so important. And because everybody gains from that. And if we can make people feel like they're growing at work, gaining professionally, and they're going to enjoy being in that space so much more. Look, it's 10 to 9. If there are any questions from the floor, or if there aren't any questions from the floor, we got anything in the chat, Tim?
No, just a lot of email addresses, which is good.
I'm really pleased you want to look more, and I hope you're not disappointed that we haven't just gone through a module today, but as you can imagine, you need to do it in your own time, in your own space, and it was just, you need to be able to go through that journey. And we're happy to share. I mean, anyone who's dealt with us already knows that we're totally open and we're happy to share anything we can. We understand that you guys are sometimes assessing this for your whole organization, so don't be afraid to talk to us. We're totally open to that. It's Friday, it's almost 9 o'clock. We are finishing slightly early, but Helene, unless you've got anything else to add or anyone else to add, yeah, I think we're all, I just thank you all for joining us today. It is just such a pleasure to be able to launch this. It's been huge putting all this together. We've learned a lot on our journey. We are continuing to grow as a team. Please keep challenging us. Please keep telling us what you need and what you want. It's just such a pleasure. I'll hand over to you, Lee, and you could close us out with the karakia. Thank you.
Right. Kia ora, kia ora. Yeah, ngā mihi koutou. So thank you to everybody, particularly giving up your time, but also your energy and your concentration and your wairua, your spirit. You bring that all with you when you come to these sessions. So I really appreciate that. And we will close with karakia. Unahia, ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, ki te ara tangata. Hoia rā e rongo, whakairea aki ki runga. Kia tina, tina. Huie, tai ki e.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Oh, thank you so much, Lee. Hey, if you would like this and you want to continue these conversations, we do have a coffee and kororo group. And for those of you from the group, we have got a topic coming up and you're about to see an invite. We're going to talk about the importance of voiceovers in e-learning for our next topic. So if you go into LinkedIn and put in coffee and kororo, you'll find a group in there that you are able to join. So just let us know if you want to keep continuing this conversation and talking about the space that we go in e-learning, because they're a great group of people. Nice to meet you all. Happy Friday. Have a fabulous day and enjoy your weekend. Thank you for joining us.
Ka kite.
Thank you.